Thank you, Annika. I feel good about both the applause and also the introduction to be a national treasure. I need to come back to how we're going to hold on to that. Extremely happy to be here. The first time ever I got an invitation to speak in Sundsvall. I feel privileged. It's not only Sundsvall, of course, a very important part of northern Sweden, which is extremely important to us in Telia. It's definitely an IT metropole of Sweden. And maybe the most important for me is that the home of 850 Telia people, actually. So this is our third largest site for Telia. And I believe, it's almost right, I think at least, Malin, that we are the third largest private employer in Sundsvall. So this is a very important place for us to be, and I'm really happy to be here and talk about our journey, which at least Annika, I think, is not so difficult. So I will invite you for more discussions, Annika. But we are, I usually call us 164 years a young company, not old. And the reason I say that for 164 years, I think the only thing that Telia has actually done is to change. Otherwise, it would be impossible to still be here. Anything from telegraphs to copper networks to introducing NMT, which was the first mobile network in the world, to being first in the world to introduce 4G. It's been constant change, very often driven by technology. So then you can ask, as Annika is doing, so what's the big deal? Why is it so hard to change now? And I would claim, with all that change in the baggage, this is the hardest thing we have so far done. And that, of course, has to do with the environment and how quickly that environment is changing. And I'm going to come back to that. But when you do all that change, you have to decide, what are you going to be in that environment? Because you always have choices. And what we have said when we talk about new generation telco is that we are not going to be something else. We want to be something more for our customers. We want to be more for our current customers, and we want to be more for more customers. But we want to bring with us what we always have been. We have connected Sweden for 164 years. I take no credit for this, but I always brag a little bit, and I say that Sweden is the second most connected country in the world. And it would not have been if it had not been for very daring men and women at both Televerket and Telia, who made huge billion SEK dollar investments into infrastructure for many, many years, when probably nobody could really make the business case because we didn't know yet exactly what we were going to do with that. And thanks to the fact that we are the most connected country in the world, we have also managed to become one of the most digitalized countries in the world. At least in some aspects, maybe not all. So we want to become something more. We want to be more relevant to our customers. We want to take a bigger part in Swedish society and digitalize Sweden. So what does that mean? That means that we have to become extremely good at understanding the world. And the world is moving very quickly. You can look at trends in many, many ways, and I will just talk about 4 very briefly that I think is significant for us. The first is the rapid technology development, and you may have talked about this all day. The big difference is, I grew up, by the way, when I went to university, there were no mobile phones. I stepped into Ericsson at the time when we started to develop mobile phones. So I grew up with Moore's law and linear development. That's all gone. There's no linear development, it's exponential. And whenever you stop and think about, how quickly do I need to run this project? How do I reorganize? How do I become better? Think exponential, because that's what drives us. It's impossible to drive anything the way we did 10 years ago, because nothing was exponential yet. So without going into all the different technologies we work on, it's exponential that is the hard thing. The second thing, which I think is for all of us, is that all those technologies you hear about, whether it's artificial intelligence or robotics or whatever, that's not for the tech companies. That's for yourself and your process development. So that really is about people, which is the challenging and the fun fact. The user experience is driven completely by consumer behavior. And here Sweden is best in class. I think Sweden is the most digitalized country on a consumer level because of the consumers we have. That's not just because we connected, it's also because we had PCs in school early, etc., etc. But we don't get compared anymore to our own industry. I really am not so interested if Telia is better than Telenor at something. It doesn't count any longer. Because when you look at the Telia.se, you compare that to your experience at Zalando or Spotify or something else. That's the benchmark. So I have to be so obsessed by what is the consumer seeing right now. Who is doing the best application for my customers right now? Because that's what I will be compared towards. That's not the pace of working of an older generation telco. That really sets the benchmark. We have an aging population. This is the same all over the Western world. And this is fascinating because it's not just that it's a challenge for our healthcare system and all of that. It's a tremendous opportunity for new ecosystems and new business perspectives. How are we going to deliver to the aging population who did not grow up in the digital age? It's not just the healthcare, that's an obvious one. But it may be shopping online. There's a million opportunities that comes from this. And last but not least is urbanization. Funnily enough, the urbanization trend, Sweden is right on top of it still. Sometimes I think people are already living in cities all over Sweden, but we're still driving that urbanization trend. And yet, we want to protect that people can live everywhere. So one of our big bets right now is to really build out mobile networks and fiber outside of the city areas. And then, how do you make that work? And how do you make the economies work around that? All of this is impossible unless you become a wizard on digitalization. And when you do, you can ride all those trends. So this is what it means for Telia. We already call it a brave new world. The customers have driven us this far. I've only been here for 2 years, so I was not here when Skype was introduced. But there's a story how the telcos blocked Skype. Because, of course, the telcos didn't want people to call Skype voice over IP because it obviously interrupted the revenue streams. So you blocked Skype for as long as you could, and then you had to let go because that's what the customers wanted to have, right? That's just one example. A lot of those things, right now, I swear, right now somewhere in Sundsvall, somebody's thinking about an innovation, an application that will disrupt the revenue streams at Telia, right this very moment. And if you think like that the whole time, you need to feel that haunted the whole time that somebody is innovating like that. We're very good at that in Sweden. The second thing I think we haven't come as far on is actually the digitalization that drives benefits for society and even in our large enterprises. We have a ton of work to be done here, which also represents a very, very big opportunity for everybody in academics, in business, in public sector. We're not number one in the world on this. We're not number two either. And actually, a lot of countries are climbing up while we are actually sliding down that ladder. This is a really important area for us in Sweden. My view is that this will be very accelerated by global platforms. So here we have the big Googles and the Microsoft and all of them, and I'm not going to talk about them because you probably know more about them than I do. That's scale. So it will be big global platforms. I do believe, though, that this is where the local ecosystems come into play. Yes, global platforms, but to make that happen, to solve the e-health opportunities in the outskirts of Sundsvall, that's not going to be a big global platform company coming in to do it. It will be our relationships and our ecosystems. And this, I believe, is a very, very fundamental key, how we learn to create those local ecosystems in different parts of Sweden. And this will drive digitalization in a way that we have to if we want to continue and improve Sweden. This may look like a very simple slide. I will tell you that for a company like Telia, this is a very challenging slide. This has been our world for almost 164 years. We had what we call an ecosystems. We would sit together with Ericsson. We would come up with our networks and our services. They would be integrated. We would package them, sell out to the customers, and send a bill. And we would be done. We would pick up a call if you called and you need a service. This is our world tomorrow. Our services are not vertically integrated with everything. We need to be in completely new partnerships with our customers, with other partners, with our competitors, with research institutes. And that's the only way that we will create new revenue streams. And this is a fundamental difference in how you work internally, how you work externally, how you actually even create a value revenue stream. And I think that's the case for a lot of companies today. We have already started, and this is really what we talk about when we talk about New Gen Telco. We started creating both POCs, but also real projects, where we actually go into these types of relationships and we create whole new value propositions. And I'll take just some examples here to give you a feeling what it is. We have a project called PIM, which is actually remote mining with Boliden, where we work with Boliden, Volvo, and Ericsson to actually enable Boliden to virtually mine without going down, actually, all the way underground. So they can sit up normal in their office and actually mine, which is a fantastic way of solving it. And now we're rolling into 5G and enabling really the fast and no latency connections. We would not be able to do that in the old way of working. We've connected public transportation in Skåne, not just having Wi-Fi on the buses, but really having real-time information about where the buses are, when you can expect them, having the ticketing system connected into the buses. We didn't do all of that ourselves. We did that with obviously a public customer, but also with a company from Umeå called Feldcom and a few other partners. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do it. So these things are already happening. We did, on the consumer side, we did something which was slightly controversial, which I usually get questions on. So I want to explain it. We included social media for free in all our mobile packages. The reason we did that was because when we talked to our consumers, they said, we don't send SMSs any longer. I'm on Messenger or WhatsApp or something else. I'm not on SMS. And SMS were included. So why would our customers not have social media included for free when that's how they used it? And these are examples how a New Gen Telco will not just be a network, which is super important to us, and a service. It will be in a much more open system. So how do we do that? And why is it difficult? So now I'm kind of opening the door a bit to our kitchen, and I'll share. I won't go very deep because we don't have time, but I want to share with you a bit, what did we find when we started this journey? And I joined a couple of years ago, and the transformation was already ongoing. So we went in and we looked at it and said, okay, what do we need to do to really forcefully drive this? And it is about modernizing and simplifying, and it's a lot of IT work, obviously. But I think it's important to first state, it's not about building a new IT infrastructure. It's about dramatically changing how you work and changing the culture that can actually enable you to succeed, more than changing the IT infrastructure. And we're changing the IT infrastructure a lot, but that's not the point, actually. This is 3 pictures that symbolizes what we didn't do well in the beginning. In Swedish, there is an expression which is asfaltera gamla kostigar, in proper skånska. And that's the first thing we realized what we had done when we sat down and reviewed it. We had taken our roads exactly as we had traveled them before. We had put asphalt on top of them so we could drive a bit faster. That's not good enough for being disrupted in the industry and doing things drastically differently. We had continued, because this is how we had always been organized. We've been organized in silos. Here everybody working with the copper infrastructure. Here is your silo. Go and be super efficient. Here is now the mobile people, go and be super efficient. Here are the fiber people, go and be super efficient. So we found that we did our transformation in silos. So in those silos, we did really well. But if I would go and ask a customer and say, would you want it this way? You're going to say, no. I want you to interface with me whatever I have. If I have my TV or my mobile or I want a whole new service with you, I want you to know me, not the technology, not the products. And we had actually continued in exactly the same way we had structured before. And the third thing we did is that we didn't give the organization the tools to work in a whole new way. And if you don't give your organization the tools to work in a whole new way, you continue working in the way you've always known how to work. And that way that we had worked was absolutely not suited for an exponential world around you. And those, if I would simplify it, were our three major issues with how we set up our transformation. And there are, of course, a ton of details in all of this. So what we did, and my three advices, the first one would be, you have to own your transformation, and you own it at the highest possible level in the company, or there's no way. This is so hard. By the way, this is the hardest thing I've done. I've done transformation in many parts of this world. This is the hardest thing I've ever done, because it goes very deep, and it's connected to the national treasure of Sweden, the whole infrastructure of Sweden, which nobody wants us to screw up. There's no fail fast when it comes to infrastructure, by the way. So own your transformation. Do not outsource that to consultants who will tell you that they can figure out exactly how to do that. You have to own it, and the management have to own it. Of course, you need partners. We have still a ton of IT partners, but you have to own it. Forcefully break the silos. And don't let anybody tell you you cannot break those silos, because if you don't break them, you're not going to make it. You're not going to drastically change. You will improve, and you will become more efficient, but you will not drastically change your company. And my third one is to change the culture. And changing culture is harder than changing IT systems. And you can never stop. I sometimes call an organization have a life of its own. So an organization also has an immune system, which means when you start to change something, and you change and it's excellent and you let it go, and you walk away and you come back 3 months later, it may have just changed back because the immune system kicked in. So in addition to actually putting a lot of things in very methodical order and doing things, you have to do visible things. We did a ton of visible things, and some things people look at you and think, wonder if she's a little bit crazy. And it's fine, because if they think that, they know it's going to feel different. One of the first things I did, because I'm obsessed by our customers, and I'll speak more about this in a while, but one of the things I did when I had just stepped in this position, I had 2 weeks vacation, and nobody really was in the office because it was middle of July. Oh, there were some people, of course, but nobody I knew because I was new. And I was in France, and somebody tweeted me, pinged me on a tweet and said, my phone doesn't work and nobody answers the phone, I can't get a hold of anybody. So I waited a bit to see if somebody picked it up, but nobody picked it up. And I couldn't get a hold of anybody. But what I did was also for the culture. So I tweeted and I said, here's my phone number, please call me, and then I will delete my tweets. So my phone number was out there for the whole world. So it took about half an hour, and I got a call from comms department who said, do you know how Twitter works? Do you know what you just did? The whole world can see your phone number. I said, yes, I know, because the customer can't get a hold of us. So the customer called me, and we figured it out, and I took away my phone number. But I did it because I wanted the customer, of course, to get a solution, but I did it equally to showcase that for me, the customer was so important that I would rather put my number on Twitter than not having the customer attended to. And that would be my one thing about changing culture. Do visible things that people understand that you stand for this and that you think that matters. And to do all of that, I think we have 2 very fundamental platforms to be able to do it. And the first one is really the customer obsession. And when I started talking about this in the beginning, I think we ended up having lots of conversations, which were very good for me, because of course a lot of passionate people jumped up and said, but I worked in sales in Telia in 15 years. I love the customer. We're so passionate about the customer. Of course they were passionate about the customer. They went to work every single day and loved what they did and loved their customers. That was not my point. A customer-obsessed company means that everybody is customer-obsessed company. So if we have 6,700 people, then you have 6,700 people who think every day about the customer and think every time they change something, will the customer think that I understood when I made this change? And if you pass that question, you will have a great company. When you don't pass that question, you will struggle. Because in this digitalized world we just talked about, the customer has so much transparency, so much of the power has moved to the customer. So he or she will not take your stuff and just pay for it unless you show that you're really getting it. And this is a huge transformation. And I really think it's a huge transformation for any established large operations, because that's not how we grew up to think about it. So this is our first platform. Our second platform, and equally important, is of course our people. One of the things that I absolutely love about joining Telia is the talent. We have incredible people, and we have such a pool of diverse people. We have people who joined straight out of school last month. We have people who joined when they left school 30 years ago and is now about to retire. We have the whole spectrum. I have 40% women in my leadership team. In our tech team, we have 40% women. There's lots of competent women. We have different nationalities. I am very big on diversity, so we chase diversity every day, even if we think we are pretty good compared to others. We drive the people agenda extremely hard every single day. It's of course about shifting skill sets. It's about people being engaged, and it's people understanding what are they working towards. So the question why is really important. I ask people very often, why are you here? What are you bringing to this journey? And when we started doing that, we had a trainee who actually came up with this idea and said, we're going to ask everybody, what is your contribution to this? And this is the engagement of every single person at Telia that will make the difference. And on that note, I challenge sometimes all my super tech proficient colleagues, and I say the only thing that will differentiate anybody in the future is culture. And the reason I say that is because culture cannot be copied. Culture is about your value system, your purpose, what you do, how you do it, and the people you have in your organization and how they do it every day. And that cannot be copied. Most other things, or everything in a digitalized world, can actually be copied. So if you combine your platforms to be your customers and your people, I think you have a really good chance of succeeding with the digitalization, and then hopefully we can all be here 30 years from now as well. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Hélène. That was super, super inspiring. Please stand here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll stand here. So I have a lot of questions, but the most important one for me, and hopefully for anyone else in the audience, is you were talking about pretty much learning and living as you learn. And I had the mental picture of a glass house, and you and your staff and the people at Telia sitting in the middle, working, and the rest of us can just look in and say, oh, that's a nice company, or they are living their values, and yeah, I recognize the service that you provide from these people.
Yes.
Is that something that you want to accomplish?
Yes, I love that. I love that, the way you describe that. I do, and absolutely, that is what we want to accomplish. And I think coming back to this transparent world in the age of digitalization, I think you have to accomplish that, because neither people who want to come and work for you nor customers will trust you if they don't feel like, when they look into your house and you see, oh, how does she actually talk to her team and how do they actually do that? I don't think we'll trust those companies.
Yes.
I think it's a very good way to describe it.
So it's better
it's a tough way to do your life, but
yeah,
but I think I think it's a really good way to describe it.
Probably totally necessary these days.
Yes.
So I used to think that you don't have customers anymore. I think you have fans, right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
kind of relate to your company.
Yes.
I'm a Telia fan, by the way. I have been having Telia for 20 years now.
Thank you.
She already did all the commercials, so I can say that. But you also said, made some comparison with online shopping like Zalando and everything, and you talked about user and, experience and customer experience. Could you please elaborate a little bit on that, because you're two different types of businesses?
Yes, yeah, no, correct. So I think the way I look at it, so if you look at, so I'll try to pull it all together now. So if you look at what we can do today, when I say that, you're going to think, oh, I wonder what she means, because if you're telling a customer today, it certainly doesn't feel like Zalando or neither or Spotify when you use our services. What we can do today with our IT infrastructure, we couldn't do that. So that's as simple as that. We couldn't do that. We have the vision, we cannot do that. What we build towards is, we don't build our IT infrastructure now saying this is what it's going to look like. What we're building towards is, we have now a whole UX team that sits very central. We introduced a head of customer experience reporting directly to me, who drives horizontally. What will that actually look like? No matter what services you use from us, and how do you actually come in contact with us, and what's your interaction with us, you're going to feel that, okay, that's the Telia way, and you're going to feel, okay, they got it. They understood that this is how we wanted this time of the, in 2017. Yeah. And today that wouldn't be the case for most people, depending on what you use. If you just use one plain service, maybe, but if you use several services, you wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah. So being consistent across the line, So from one thing to another, we talked about it before you came on stage with me, and Telia is not just about consumers, right? It's about other types of business-to-business customer and partnerships, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and you are talking about IoT. Could you please just give us a short overview of what you're doing with the Internet of Things side?
We do, yes. We have actually done IoT for quite some time, or it was called M2M when we started, before I was there, and which has been, to a certain extent, pure connectivity, even if the ambition has been higher from the beginning. But to give you an idea, Tesla's, for example, in Nordics, is connected by Telia. And when Tesla called my previous colleague, because I was not even here, and said that they wanted Telia to work with them to deliver an IoT solution for them, their own way of articulating that was that, well, we're not looking just for connectivity, because our cars will really be smartphones. And it just puts it into context of these partnerships, which is now different. It's not just delivering somebody and somebody is a customer. It becomes a partnership. What do you need? How do we develop that? What's the software that goes on top of it? What's the agility? How often? Et cetera, et cetera. And that was one of our earliest. We are connecting mouse traps for anti-semics. So we know when you have to go out and empty them, and for example, you get your whole control tower. E-health is a really important area where we work with another one which we could never do create any value in e-health on our own. So we work with, for example, Region Kalmar is a really good partner of ours, where we develop applications and solutions that Region Kalmar then put in the hands of their users. Now we, of course, is a partner, and we need to be very trusted. So the trust that Telia has always stood for is really important. Those are all IoT applications, and we're connecting cars. We have a product called Telia Sense, where you can put Wi-Fi and lots of services in your car, etc. So this is an area that I would say will explode, and I would say almost none of them is a one-to-one relationship. It's a partnership with a number of partners and companies, I would say, including the customer himself.
Yeah. So one more question. We have a few questions from the audience as well, and we'll have time to ask them. But I'm really interested in the thing you said about Boliden mining.
Yes.
I know a small startup that has developed a drone which they send down to the mines like a canary bird, in a sense.
Yes.
Have you heard of them?
Yes, I have heard of them, yes.
So are you working with startups at all?
We do, yes. And that's super, and I haven't talked much about that, and that's a very, very good point. We work a lot with startups, and maybe a bit too much Stockholm focused so far. We'll see that as a starting point. But that's a really important, it's an important, firstly, it's an important innovation injection, different from when everything was innovated inside your own company. From their startups is a really important injection. I think we are also important for startups because we can help scale quicker. Yes. So it's a extremely good combination. And I do believe that the vibrant startup community of Sweden is absolutely a key to digitalizing Sweden in the way I talked about it. A really good point. Yep. Yes.
Excellent. So I have a lot of more questions, but it's audience time. So these questions have been asked by the audience from Mentimeter. And let's see, which one should we take? Well, you can choose one if you like.
Good questions.
I like the one in the middle. That's personal.
What's the main reason you started to work with Telia?
Yeah,
I can tell the story why I started with Telia. It's a very good story. So today when I walked in here, I thought, because it's 30 years, I thought, where was I 30 years ago? And I was at the University of Lund studying international business. 30 years ago, I didn't know the tech sector really existed or that I would ever want to work there. My only goal was to work internationally. That's the only thing I knew I wanted to do, and hence I picked international business. So the irony of that story is that I'm now heading up probably the most Swedish thing of them all, which is Telia Sweden. But before this job, I managed to work outside of Sweden the whole time. And when I was called about joining Telia, I was living in Boston, and I loved Boston. Absolutely loved Boston. I worked for a great IT company. And I got a call from Stockholm from an executive search who said, would you move to Sweden and work for a telco? And I'm like, no. Why would I move to Stockholm and work for a telco? Boston is great. And he was very lucky because I was boarding to fly to London, and so was Johan Dennelind, who is president of Telia Company, and he said, why don't you just have a coffee with Johan? So we were completely unbriefed and had a coffee together and had a very good conversation, which was very much driven on your actually beginning. A company like Telia that has built so much, where do you go with this? And what can you do with digitalization? And I was very much working on data analytics and how can you drive a future like that? And then I had a series of conversations with both Johan and Marie Erling, and I felt like I want to be part of that journey. And I want to really see if I can help shape Telia into something that continues and help building Sweden in all its way of being a great country. So that's the reason I joined Telia. And if somebody would have asked me before, I would have said, absolutely, I wouldn't. That's a company I would never work for, probably. So it's, and I love it. It's an absolutely incredible journey. So that's how I ended up joining Telia.
That's how you started.
Yeah, it's the journey.
That made me think of, well, I guess one part of showing that you are disrupting both your company and the market is by joining up for the customer's benefit with companies like Spotify, Storytel, and so on. Are you kind of rubbing off on their kind of innovative, disruptive business model and showing off that we can do this too?
It's another way. And I think this is, you're absolutely right. I think one of the difference between that slide of saying you have your own ecosystem and you work only with an Ericsson or Nokia versus being in this open environment is to really open up and to really say, all right, I need to get out there, I need to put myself out there, and you're outside your comfort zone many times a day. That's a good thing, by the way, if you're outside your comfort zone many times a day. And when we did a small investment in Spotify, I think it's almost 2 years ago now, it's about 2 years ago, and the investors were very, very critical to that and didn't like it, didn't understand it, what's a telco doing in Spotify? But the reason for that was that, actually, to do joint projects, to be working with them, to get inspired from their culture and how they actually work in this new world, which is very different from where we came from. And many of these relationships actually have that, and they, from our side, of course, get all the stability, all the processes, and it's really a very dynamic. It's a really dynamic way of learning, but that's absolutely right.
That's a win-win, I guess.
It is definitely a win-win.
We have time for another audience question.
Well, we can pick anything.
Yeah, we can pick anything. They're long. Can humans continue to cope with exponential change, or do we need to slow down and chill out at some point in the future?
Yeah. That's
no pressure.
That's a super good question. It's sometimes I look at all of this and I think how much can humans actually cope with, and how quickly can you cope with it? My poor team, as a summer present, I ordered them a book called Exponential Organizations. I'm sure they were very happy about that, which is written by the head of Geneva University, Ismail, and I lost his last name now, Ismail, but you'll find it. But it's absolutely, you can also look him up on TED Talks and YouTube, etc., if you want to get inspired. But it's a great book to actually address, the way we act and walk and talk and learn today, we can't deal with much more. I think you all go home sometimes and feel like, I feel sometimes my head is spinning and I take it in more than and I'm constantly on Twitter and Instagram just to see my feeds and see what's happening, and did I miss something? So the way we do things today, no, we probably can't do that much more. But if we change things fundamentally how we do them, and a lot of the things actually that we don't need to do get automated, and we get them in context, and you actually apply algorithms, so it actually becomes meaning in them and not all those bursting feeds towards you the whole time. When I read this book, I thought, okay, I think I'm getting it. I think we will be able to cope with that exponential future if we drastically change how we do things. If we don't drastically change, no, we can't. I think there's a limit to everybody, actually.
Yeah,
I think it's a really good question.
Hélène, what's the next big business disruption, you think, within the telco area?
It's the next big business disruption in telco area? What do we pick?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, it's a hard question because we have several different areas. But it is definitely connected to IoT. And I think and I saw there was a question, I think, related to that here. We go into some of these partnerships and doing some of these POCs and minimal viable products, etc. And you look at it and you think, what part are we going to make money out of in this? And I'm sure everybody goes in thinking the same. What is actually the business case? And I think that's, per se, is the biggest disruption. Because, of course, if we're going to continue spending billions in networks so Swedes can actually be connected, there needs to be a revenue stream somewhere. And if the revenue streams are not tightly integrated vertically, we obviously have to find them from here. And I think that's the disruptive area on actually building those value propositions so they can make sense.